The day after our engagement party, the world felt soft and bright. I sat on the sunlit patio, sipping my coffee and admiring the diamond on my left hand. It felt like a dream. Mark was inside, taking a business call. His 7-year-old son, Leo, who I already loved like my own, suddenly ran out the glass door, his bare feet slapping on the stone. He was holding Mark's iPad. "Clara, look! I found the picture of Daddy's other wedding." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Honey, Daddy's never been married. You must be confused." He just shook his head, his face serious. "No, look!" He shoved the iPad into my hands. My laugh died in my throat. It was Mark, in a sharp black tuxedo, kissing a woman in a stunning white wedding gown. It wasn't a costume party. It was a professional, expensive-looking photo. Then, Leo delivered the final blow, pointing to the woman. "That's Mummy. Daddy said we can't tell you about her." My world didn't just crack. It shattered. If you've ever had a moment that divides your life into before and after, you know this feeling. What would you do? Let me know in the comments. And please share this. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the iPad on the patio cushion. I couldn't breathe. Mark chose that moment to slide the door open, smiling. "Everything okay out here?" His smile vanished when he saw my face. "Clara, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the screen. He saw the photo of him and the other woman, and his face went pale. "Leo, go inside. Now," he commanded. Leo fled. Mark rushed to my side, grabbing my hands. "Clara, please, let me explain." He sank onto the chair opposite me, his eyes full of a pain I now realized was a performance. "Her name is Helena. It was a mistake. A marriage of convenience. She needed a green card, that's all. It was over years ago. She's unstable. Clara, she means nothing to me. You and Leo are my life." He was crying, begging me to believe him. His voice was so sincere, so broken, that I almost did. I wanted to, but something in my gut screamed. It was all too smooth, too practiced. I stayed at him, my heart at war with my brain. "A green card?" I whispered. "Mark, that picture, it looks so real." He nodded, wiping away a fake tear. "She insisted on a ceremony. It was part of her instability. It meant nothing." I wanted to drop it, to erase the last 5 minutes and go back to being the happy, engaged woman I was. But my eyes kept drifting back to the iPad. I zoomed in on the photo, my mind catching on a detail. His hand. On his left hand in the photo, he was wearing a simple, thick gold band. My blood ran cold. It was the same gold band he wore right now. The one he told me was his late father's. The one he never took off. My gaze snapped from the photo to his hand. Then I saw it. In the background of the photo, behind the happy couple, was a floral arrangement with a small, elegant digital clock. The date on it wasn't from years ago. It was from last week. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, my legs feeling like cement, and walked inside. I locked myself in the guest bathroom, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He was lying. Actively, easily lying. The wedding wasn't years ago. It was last week. I was his fiancé, and he had just gotten married to someone else. I sank to the cold tile floor, clutching my phone. My first instinct was to call the police. But for what? Bigamy. I had no proof but a photo on an iPad he had already taken back. I needed help. I called the only person I trusted in the world, my best friend, Julia. "Clara, how's the newly engaged woman?" she chid. My voice broke as I told her everything. The line went silent. Then, Julia's voice turned to ice. "Clara, listen to me. He's a monster. You have to get out of there." I sobbed that I didn't know what to do. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice full of a fear that matched my own. "A man who can lie like that, he's not just a cheater. He's dangerous." Julia's warning echoed in my head, making the huge, beautiful house feel like a trap. I told Mark I had a sudden migraine and needed to rest, locking the bedroom door. My mind was racing. Helena. He said she was unstable. I needed to know who she really was. I grabbed my laptop and, with trembling fingers, Typed her name into a professional networking site. Julia had always said I was the best graphic designer because I was a great researcher. I found her in seconds. My stomach dropped. The woman in the photo stared back at me, but her profile wasn't that of an unstable person. She was Helena Vance, the chief financial officer of a massive corporation based in Chicago. Her profile was polished, powerful, and full of awards. It was terrifying. And then I saw the line in her professional summary, a single sentence that stopped my heart. Partnered in business and in life with my husband, Mark. I stayed at the screen until the words blurred. Partnered in business and in life. This wasn't a green card marriage. This was a power couple. This was his real life. So what was I? My terror was quickly being replaced by a cold, hard anger. I was a side project. A fool. I spent the next hour digging, my movements frantic. I was so absorbed in my search that I jumped when Mark knocked on the door. Clara, darling. I plastered a weak, tired smile on my face as he entered. He was holding a beautiful leather-bound folder. I know you're not feeling well, he said, his voice full of fake concern. But I have wonderful news. Now that we're getting married, it's time to really merge our lives. I've spoken to my wealth manager. We should move your inheritance into our new joint trust. It's safer, and we'll get a much better return. He was rushing it. The photo, the lies, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about my money, my inheritance. It was all I had left from my aunt, and it was substantial. Mark knew the exact amount. Oh, Mark, I said, forcing my voice to sound tired and overwhelmed. That's a big step. Can I have my lawyer look at the papers first? His smile tightened, just for a second, but he recovered quickly. Of course, darling. Whatever makes you comfortable. He left the folder on my nightstand and kissed my forehead. Rest. I waited until I was sure he was downstairs. That night, I lay awake in the dark, pretending to be asleep, my mind screaming. Around 2 a.m., I heard it. A faint vibration. It wasn't his regular phone, which was on his nightstand. The sound was coming from his gym bag in the corner. I slipped out of bed, my heart hammering. I dug through the bag, and my fingers closed around a second, hidden burner phone. I pressed the power button. It was unlocked. It was open to a text chain with H. Helena. The last message, from her, sent just an hour ago. Clara's getting suspicious. We need to accelerate the transfer. I'll handle her. Hands shaking so badly I could barely read. The texts were cold, full of business terms and dollar amounts. They were talking about my inheritance, my assets. But then I saw a different kind of message. A photo. I clicked on it. My breath hitched. It was Mark, Helena, and Leo standing in front of a Christmas tree. And Helena was holding a baby. A tiny, perfect baby girl. I scrolled faster. More photos. Mark feeding the baby a bottle. Leo kissing his little sister. The texts were full of references to our kids. Plural. Leo wasn't his only child. He didn't just have a secret wife. He had a whole, separate, current family. The life I thought I was building with him, the family I was so excited to join, was a complete and total fabrication. I was nothing. I was just a walking bank account. I felt sick, wanting to throw the phone across the room. I kept scrolling, my mind numb with the scale of his betrayal. I didn't know what I was even looking for anymore. And then I saw a name I knew. A name that shouldn't have been there. Julia. My best friend. My rock. The one who told me Mark was dangerous. My thumb hovered over her name, not wanting to know. I clicked it. The text between her and Mark went back months. Back to before I even met him. My blood turned to ice. Is she buying it? Julia had texted him last week, right after our engagement party. She's head over heels, Mark replied. Just keep her focused on the wedding plans. I'll handle the rest. I remembered chapter 4, her warning. It wasn't a warning. It was a script. She was in on it. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had delivered me to him. The woman who held me while I cried about my aunt's passing was the same woman setting me up to be ruined. The world tilted. I stumbled back and sat on the edge of the bed, the pieces of my life rearranging themselves into a horrifying new picture. The chance meeting with Mark at that coffee shop 2 weeks after my aunt's funeral. Julia had insisted I go out. She bumped into Mark, introducing us. It was all a setup. My inheritance, my grief, my trust, they were just tools for them. I wasn't a fiancé. I was a Mark. The emotional abuse was staggering. I thought about the past 6 months, every laugh, every I love you, every promise of a future. It was all a lie. A cold, calculated con. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything in the room. I looked at my sleeping fiancé, this monster, and the sickness I felt turned into something else. It was a cold, hard rage. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. My mind became crystal clear, sharp with a single purpose. I spent the next hour using the burner phone to take pictures of every single text message, every photo, every financial document, and email them to a new, secret email address. I documented everything. Mark's conversation with Helena, his collaboration with Julia, their plan to handle me. Then I slipped the burner phone back into his gym bag, exactly as I'd found it. I went to the bank's website and, with a few clicks, opened a new, secret account and transferred the bulk of my liquid assets. At 7 a.m., I woke up and walked into the kitchen, where Mark was making coffee. I gave him a bright, trusting smile. "Darling," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "I thought about it all night. You're right. We should be a team. Let's sign the papers. Let's merge everything." The look of relief on his face was all the confirmation I needed. The trap was set. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't trust my lawyer, who Julia had recommended. I couldn't trust anyone. Except, I went back to the texts on my secret email. I searched for a name Mark and Helena had mentioned, someone they were clearly terrified of. Alex. One text from Mark read, "We have to keep this clean. If Alex finds out, we're finished." Who was Alex? I spent the day digging. I found him, Alex Chen, a former investigative journalist for a major financial paper. He had been ruined 2 years ago by a source who fed him fake documents, leading to a massive retraction and the end of his career. The source, I discovered, was an unnamed financier. Mark. They hadn't just conned me, this was their pattern. I found Alex working at a small, local news blog. I sent him an email with a single subject line. "I have proof. They're doing it again." He replied in under 2 minutes. Where and when? We met in a crowded, noisy coffee shop. Alex was intense, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He listened without interrupting as I laid out the entire story, finishing by showing him the photos of the texts on my phone. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "Mark and Helena," he said, his voice quiet. "They ruined me. I lost my job, my reputation, everything." He explained Mark's system. They targeted people with recent windfalls, using emotional connections to gain access to their assets. Then they'd invest the money in fraudulent shell developments, take the cash, and leave the partner, me, with all the debt and criminal liability. "This time, he's not getting away," I said, my voice hard. "I'm going to the signing. But this time, he's going to sign a real document. And it won't be with me." Alex leaned in, his eyes bright for the first time. "I know exactly what to do. And I know who else needs to be at this party." I called Mark. "I've booked the conference room at my bank for tomorrow at 10 a.m., I said, forcing a cheerful, slightly naive tone. "My lawyer's busy, but I trust you. Let's just get it done." I could almost hear his greedy smile. "Wonderful, darling. I'll bring Julia. We can all go out to celebrate after." "Perfect," I said. "A celebration." The next morning, I walked into the bank, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mark and Julia were already there, sitting in the glass-walled conference room, looking smug and successful. "Clara, there she is," Julia chirped, getting up to hug me. I didn't flinch. Mark slid the thick stack of trust papers across the polished table. "After you, my love." I picked up the heavy, expensive pen. I looked him right in the eye, and then I smiled. "You first," I said, pushing the papers back. "But I think you have the wrong ones." Mark's smile faltered. Clara, what are you talking about? Right on cue, the conference room door opened. In walked a tall, impeccably dressed woman with an ice-cold expression. It was Helena. Beside her was a man holding a briefcase. Mark's face turned to ash. Helena! What are you doing here? He stammered. Helena didn't even look at him. She looked at me, gave a sharp nod, and then turned to her lawyer. The lawyer slapped a different, even thicker stack of papers onto the table in front of Mark. These are divorce proceedings, Mark, the lawyer said, his voice booming in the quiet room, along with a full asset injunction and a petition for sole custody, citing spousal abandonment, fraud, and bigamy. You've been served. Julia's jaw dropped. Mark just stayed, his face a mask of white-hot rage and disbelief. You, he whispered, looking at me. You did this. Me? I just brought the right people together, I said. Mark turned on Julia, his voice a low growl. Do something. Say something. Julia stood up, her face pale, looking for an escape. But the door opened again. In walked Alex, holding a professional video camera on his shoulder and a press badge. A bright light clicked on, flooding the room. Smile, Mark, Alex said, his voice cheerful. You're on the record for a story about multimillion-dollar love cons. Any comment? Julia let out a small squeak and tried to bolt for the door. She ran straight into two uniformed police officers who had just entered and were now blocking the exit. Her face crumpled. The trap hadn't just been sprung, it had snapped shut. It had been Alex's brilliant idea. He'd said, if he's conning you, he's conning her, too. We found Helena at her Chicago office. She was hostile, defensive, and ready to call security. Then I showed her the burner phone texts. Not the ones between her and Mark, but the ones between Mark and Julia. The ones where they detailed their plan to drain Helena's accounts, too, framing her as the unstable wife and the mastermind of the whole con. They planned to flee the country with my money and hers. Helena's cold, corporate mask broke. She wasn't just a villain, she was the first victim, and the one who stood to lose the most. That man, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage, will not take my children from me. She agreed to time her divorce filing for our signing, giving us the legal leverage to freeze everything before Mark could hide it. Back in the bank, the scene was chaos. Julia saw the police officers by the door and completely fell apart. All her smug confidence evaporated. She burst into tears, her hands raised as if she was already under arrest. It wasn't me. It was all him, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Mark. He made me do it. He promised me a cut, but I never wanted to hurt anyone. He's a monster. She completely and immediately flipped, confessing everything in a desperate, pathetic attempt to save herself. Mark just stared at her, his expression murderous. The officers looked at each other, one of them pulling out a notepad. You might want to save that for your official statement, he said dryly. Julia just sobbed. I'll tell you everything. Please. The best friend who had betrayed me was now, ironically, the one burying Mark completely. The room was silent except for Julia's sobs and the quiet whirring of Alex's camera. Mark was finished. He knew it. I looked at him, this small, pathetic man who had tried to ruin my life. I reached into my purse and pulled out the burner phone. I slid it across the table to the police officers. Here is all the evidence you'll need, I said calmly. Text messages, photos, account numbers, proof of fraud, conspiracy, and, as his wife's lawyer pointed out, bigamy. Then, I did the one thing I'd been dreaming of for days. I slowly twisted the heavy diamond ring off my finger, the symbol of his lie. I didn't throw it. I placed it gently on the table in front of him. I believe this belongs to you, Helena, I said, glancing at her. She shook her head. I don't want it. I shrugged. Or maybe, I said, looking at Mark, it belongs to the bank. One of the officers stepped forward and put his hand on Mark's shoulder. Sir, I think you need to come with us. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Mark's composure finally broke. He lunged, or tried to, his face purple with rage. He wasn't screaming at Helena, or Julia, or the cops. He was screaming at me. You did this. You're crazy. You're unstable. His voice was high and shrill. The same words he had used to describe Helena. The same words he would have used to describe me when he'd taken my money and disappeared. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes, my voice cold and steady. I'm not the unstable one, Mark. I'm just the one you underestimated. I turned, nodded to Alex, and we walked out of the bank together, leaving the wreckage of Mark's life behind us. The next day, Alex's story broke. It was everywhere. Financier and socialite partner in multimillion-dollar love con. It was the lead story on national news. Alex had done his job perfectly. He detailed the entire scheme, how they targeted me, the burner phone, the fake wedding photos, the other family, and the betrayal by my best friend. He had footage of Julia's confession in the bank and Mark's unstable outburst. But the story didn't paint me as a victim. It painted me as the brilliant, sharp woman who had uncovered the con and set an elaborate trap to bring them all down. My name was cleared, and my reputation was intact. In fact, I was a hero. I received hundreds of messages from people, mostly women, who had been victims of similar, smaller cons, thanking me for fighting back. A week later, with the media frenzy dying down, I got a call. It was from Child Services. With Mark and Julia arrested and denied bail, and Helena facing conspiracy charges, the children were in the system. Leo and his baby sister. My heart ached. Leo, who had innocently started this all with a photo. He was just a pawn, and he didn't deserve this. I thought about the revenge. It wasn't about hurting people, it was about justice. Hurting kids wasn't justice. I made a call to Helena's lawyer. I gave a sworn statement that, based on the texts I saw, Helena was also being manipulated by Mark, especially regarding the children. I then used my resources to find Helena's parents, Leo's maternal grandparents. I sent them an anonymous file with all the information they needed to petition for custody. It was the right thing to do. The children deserved a safe home, far away from this toxicity. Months passed. The trials were swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark and Julia both received long prison sentences for fraud, conspiracy, and a host of other charges. Helena, for her full cooperation in my testimony, received a much lighter sentence, probation and community service. She got full custody of her children and moved back to Chicago to live with her parents, free of Mark forever. As for me, I sold the house, that beautiful prison. I sold every piece of furniture, every gift he'd ever given me. I wanted a clean slate. I used the money I'd saved, and the story I now owned, to start a new venture. Alex and I opened a firm, a forensic consulting agency. We specialize in helping victims of sophisticated romantic and financial fraud. We dig, we find the truth, and we help them set their own traps. 1 year later, I was sitting in my new, bright office overlooking the city. The walls were white, the furniture was modern, and there wasn't a single memory of Mark in it. I was a guest on a major financial podcast, not as a victim, but as an expert. I was speaking about trust, verification, and emotional firewalls. I felt confident, sharp, and, for the first time in a long time, completely secure in my own life. As I finished the interview, Alex came in with 2 coffees, just the way I like it. He smiled. You were great. You were natural. Our partnership was easy. It was professional, respectful, and built on a foundation of absolute, unshakable truth. There were no secrets, no burner phones. Just work. Good work. It felt amazing. As Alex and I were planning our next case, my assistant brought in a package. I opened it. It was a framed photo. My heart skipped a beat, just for a second, before I saw the image. It wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a lie. It was a candid shot of me and Alex at our new office's opening party. We were both laughing, caught in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. I turned the frame over. There was a handwritten note from Alex on the back. To the woman who changed everything. Here's to a real partnership. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. I hung the photo on the wall, the morning on that sunlit patio feeling like it happened to someone else, a lifetime ago. I was no longer a fiancé. I wasn't a victim. I was finally, and truly, engaged with my own life. Thank you for reading my story. If you or someone you know is trying to find their way back from a betrayal, please share this. Remember, the best revenge isn't anger. It's building a better, stronger life. You have the power to write your own ending.